Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to the late February edition of Molten Music Monthly. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm going out of my mind with things at the moment. There's just stuff happening all over the place, and I had promised to bring you the February edition of this quite early in order to talk about NAMM, but I felt that we already talked about NAMM in the live stream that I did right over the weekend, and so it feels like I've talked about it a lot. However, I haven't really talked about it in a monthly, so whether we like it or not, whether we're bored with the NAMM products or not, I think it's probably time that I just went through all of the stuff that I thought was cool and groovy at NAMM, and since then as well, because there has been a couple of weeks, although it is renowned for being the quietest time of the year, because everyone's just done NAMM and they all get home and go, whew, and then nothing happens for at least a month. But then after the craziness of NAMM, I've also been non-stop crazy myself, and it seems to be continuing. I mean, I'm only just sort of holding it together. I mean, this weekend, I've got a Kung Fu grading. The following weekend, I'm singing and playing guitar at a 60s gig. Got the hippie shades. Then I've got a Soul Circus the weekend after that, or is it the weekend before that? I don't know, where I'm going to be creating a kind of a soundscape thing for Great Yarmouth Minster. Stuffed in there somewhere is an open music electronic night. And while all this is going on, I've got some big synthesizer event at Thomann, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. And so I don't know whether I'm playing 60s songs, I'm Euro-racking, am I creating soundscapes, am I micing, am I fighting things? I don't really know, and I got so confused this morning that I actually shaved my sideboard off. So I am just losing it. So what have we got to talk about today? Well, we have shed loads. I've got like 30 products to talk about. So I won't even do my quirky summary this month. We're just going to dive straight in. But first, the Thomann Synth Reactor. Yeah, right, this is a weird thing. Got this invitation to go to Thomann in Germany, in Nuremberg, famous for trials and an enormous music shop. And last year they did this thing where they invited a whole bunch of guitar-y type YouTubers along to make videos, have a good time and play with guitar stuff. Well, apparently that was so successful they've decided to risk it all on a bunch of synthesizer nerds like myself. Apparently that's me now. I had no idea. So the idea is that you gather together a whole bunch of YouTubers and get them to make videos on stuff all in one place, all at once, with unlimited access to a whole load of gear. Now, what could possibly go wrong there? And so you've got a bunch of like proper people going along, like DivKid and Bo Beats and Gaz from Sonic State. You've got people flying in from America and the other side of the world. It's quite an event. I mean, it's going to be fantastic to meet these people, and I have absolutely no idea why they thought it was a good idea to invite me along. But I'm just going with it. I don't have any clue as to what I'm going to do when I get there, other than I'm going to poke people, I guess, and poke bits of equipment. But then that's the idea, I think. The idea is to just throw us together and see what happens. I mean, imagine it was probably easier with the guitarists last year because, you know, with guitarists, you just give them a beer and they'll do anything you like. But with us lot, we're kind of weird and strange and really nerdy in places and fiercely independent and worried about things and anxious about that. And, you know, I mean, we've been chatting online mostly about the speed of SD cards because that seems to be the favourite topic amongst anything else. So I don't think that Thomann really know quite what they've let themselves in for. But on the plus side, we'll get together, we'll meet up, we'll have some beers, maybe some coffee and play on synths. I mean, what could be better than that? And it's going on for four days. 4 days. What am I going to do? I mean, I guess that's part of it. I mean, what would you like me to do? I mean, I'm supposed to be there making videos on stuff, on synths and that. I mean, are there any synths you'd like my opinion on? I mean, normally when I get a synth or something like this to do a demo on, I spend days and days looking at it and poking at it and working on it and trying to work out what it does, and then I relate that back into an overly long video. This is going to be the opposite of this. This is going to be, there you are, here's a Moog 1. Oh, it's great, it's great. No, it's not. Yes, it is. I don't know. I have no idea how this is going to play. So just going to go along and see what happens. But if there's something you'd like me to do, to look at, to talk to poke, then let me know. Stick it in the comments or send it to me, or just ask. I don't know, maybe I'll do a live stream from there. I don't know. Well, let's talk about it more perhaps at the live stream this weekend, which undoubtedly I'll be having, I think, if I can fit it in. So there you go. It's called the Thomann Synth Reactor event. It will be all over the internets and stuff at some point. I imagine it will be live streaming this and throwing videos out here. And all of us will be having a bit of a laugh at Thomann's expense. So that'll be fun. And I'm really sort of excited and nervous and overwhelmed and just so completely out of my depth. But moving on. Right, let's rattle on through this stuff. So Behringer weren't at NAMM, they were having their own party down the road. Now I would like to officially announce that I have made my peace with Behringer. The whole thing. I mean, everything they showed in the NAMM type coverage just looked awesome. And I think that it's time to let it all go and let Behringer do what they do, because it's exciting. It's cool, it's good. I mean, I have over here, right, this is my collection of guitar pedals, and the other day I picked up this because I needed a wah pedal for my 60s gig, you see. And what did I get? Well, I got a Behringer, because it's like 35 quid. I mean, this knob's a bit crappy on the side, but other than that, it's a wah pedal. I haven't had a wah pedal for years. I used to have a Dunlop Crybaby, of course, but I let that go. I can't remember. I think somebody stole it. I don't remember. Anyway, but this, fantastic. I got a bunch of TC guitar effects as well, and they just do the job. And I've put in an order for an MS-101 and the RD-808. Well, because I think they'd be nice devices just to have, just to play, have a synthesizer and a drum machine to play on. I think that would be awesome. And although, of course, there are the Roland boutiques which do a very similar thing, I've had a boutique. I had the A01, and the size, the form factor, the mini keys, I hated it. I just hated it. Lovely idea, just I can't bear it. Whereas the MS-101, you know, proper keys on it, it's actually a synth. That really appeals to me. And same with the RD-808, it's a proper size, got things on it. That's it. But I don't want to dwell on all of those because we've talked about all the old Behringer bits and pieces for ages. I just wanted to put out there the fact that I have blown away all of the anti-Behringer sentiment, and I just think now they're starting to deliver on what they've been doing. It's actually coming out quite good, and that's, I think, fabulous for all of us. I think we can all benefit from cheap synths. I think that's cool. But the one thing to mention is the Crave. What's a Crave? Well, it's a chocolate bar, but it's also the surprise release from Behringer over the NAMM weekend. It was the one that we had no idea about at all. The only thing we'd ever seen of it previously was a PCB. I think they'd published a photograph of that we were supposed to guess what this one's going to be. Well, it turns out that it's a little semi-modular monosynth. But of course, what we were expecting was some kind of 303 bassline clone, but it was not to be. This is something, well, kind of the same, but different. You know, it's a monosynth that uses the same oscillators as their other stuff, the Neutron and the MS-101. But this time around, they've put in a classic Moog ladder filter, and it has a built-in sequencer arpeggiator that's, you know, does look a little bit like a 303 kind of thing. But it does look kind of nice, kind of fruity, not clone-like in any way. It's its own thing. It's got a whole stack of patch points at the top, so you can patch it into all sorts of bits and pieces. It's got knobs and wooden cheeks. Yeah, it looks pretty sorted, pretty low profile, and it's going to be about $200. Well, of course it is, but that's flipping awesome. On the other side of things, though, actually getting things to market, we still really haven't had anything since the Neutron. I mean, the MS-101 I was able to pre-order, and it should be here kind of any time now. The RD-808, that's still not here. I mean, they said everything was more or less going to be released in February, and here we are right at the end of February. And it's not there. Same with the VC340, they kind of released that, and the Odyssey, and the Pro 1. All of these things are supposed to be coming out around about now, but none of them have actually arrived yet. And so these things still remain to be seen. But overall, I think at the show, Behringer really knocked it out of the park. First of all, by not being there, but the videos they produced and the content they put out there and the sound of the stuff and the finished units that they had on display, I think were all great. They did a really good job of promoting themselves and promoting their synths and getting people excited about it. Well done. Now, Arturia were the other company to give us a bit of a surprise synthesizer in the shape of the MicroFreak. It looks pretty interesting. It's got a digital oscillator coupled with a SEM filter and a weird PCB, touchy, platey type keyboard type thing. And what they managed to do was they collaborated with Mutable Instruments in order to use the algorithms from the Platts oscillator, their multi-Eurorack oscillator. They took some of those algorithms and stuffed it inside. I mean, it was kind of a weird thing, because at the event, at the launch, it was all, wow, we've been collaborating with Mutable Instruments. This has been fantastic. It's a partnership. We've been putting together this synth, and isn't it awesome? And look at it. Look at the design. It's also Mutable Instruments, you know, driven and inside. Isn't it awesome that we've been working together with our Eurorack friends over at Mutable Instruments? Well, while all that was going on, Emily from Mutable Instruments, who is Mutable Instruments, there is no one else, it's just her. She does all the designing and the production on all of the Mutable Instruments modules. She popped up on a forum going, well, we didn't really collaborate on this MicroFreak, because everyone's getting in touch and saying, wow, he did such a great job on the MicroFreak. Well done, isn't it awesome? She's going, well, no, I just said that they could use the algorithms. That was kind of it. I said, you know, stick my logo on the box, that would be nice. And off you go, because she puts everything open source, and there's been other people using those algorithms in things like BCB Rack or in the Korg Prophecy in their third oscillator. And so Mutable Instruments are very used to people using it. They just want a little bit of recognition, that's all. And so kind of Arturia somehow took hold of that and really ran with it into this big marketing jamboree in order to associate themselves as partners somehow with Mutable Instruments, and really drawing on the coolness and the respect that Mutable Instruments has. And that wasn't quite right. But anyway, by the end of the show, Emily and Arturia had spoken to each other and sorted it all out, and Arturia had basically calmed the heck down about their association, and it was all cool, and it's all cool, and everything's all cool. Emily was just a little bit sort of miffed by the way they had expressed this connection with each other, because it made you assume, and it made me assume absolutely. When I first heard about it, I thought, oh wow, that's really very cool, because I have absolute respect for Mutable Instruments, and the fact that they've been working with Arturia on this product would undoubtedly make it a better product. Absolutely. And so I was taken in by that idea. But it is important to understand these relationships and how these things are put together and who has been influencing what, because I immediately thought that the graphics on the front were something to do with Mutable Instruments, and they weren't, because they were very much in that kind of style. But she had no input into that at all. She had no input into how the filter works or how the profiles work or how the sound goes through the system. She purely gave them permission to use the algorithms. Now that's awesome. That's still awesome. I'm not taking anything away from any of that. It's just kind of like a morality tale on how companies market themselves and the information that they put out there. And the fact that information needs to be correct. Otherwise, it really can get annoying and frustrating and disillusioning for people like myself who are trying to get into your products, man, because we start to believe you less and less if you're not really giving us the full picture. Anyway, Arturia apologised and is all sorted out now, and they're all best of friends, and that's all lovely. And it still looks like to be an interesting thing, and I hope to have a go at Thomann. Also, unexpectedly from Arturia, was a new Audiofuse. Got a little Audiofuse, I've got an Audiofuse over there that I used, small box-like thing. It took ages to come, but when it came, it was actually quite good and we liked it. But they've now got a new one, an expanded one. It's called the Audiofuse Studio, and it kind of pushed it out to the side and given you control over 4 channels of input rather than 2 channels of input. Otherwise, it's the same kind of idea, the same strange sort of angle to it, big knob on the top, a few other bits and pieces, and in total it can handle 18 inputs and 20 outputs. I mean, it looks great. It's probably a bit chunky, takes up quite a bit more space than it appears, but they're pretty much stuffed everything into it, along with the 4 legendary Discrete Pro microphone preamps. There's also got a phono preamp. It runs on USB-C, it's got ADAT, MIDI, and also Bluetooth audio streaming. And alongside it, they've released an 8-channel ADAT preamp as well, so you can use the same Discrete Legendary Pro mic preamps via ADAT into the back of the Audiofuse Studio or the Audiofuse itself and make use of those digital inputs as analog inputs, which is really nice. I mean, that's something I've got down here. I use a Behringer again, 8-channel mic preamp thing to do exactly the same thing. So it's really nice that Arturia have decided to release their own version of that because it just keeps all the branding nice. Sadly, we didn't see any Eurorack from Arturia, which is something that I'd hoped we would have seen after their foray into Eurorack cases. But never mind, maybe for Superbooth. Make Noise have done their usual thing and completely boggling me with a new product. It's called the QPAS. It stands for Quantum Passages of to Analog Systems. No, I have no idea what it stands for. What does it stand for? Oh, there you go, Quad Peak Animation System. Oh yes, so you take your quads and you peak them and they get animated and come out of the system from the other side. And what I love about Make Noise is that they just can't express to you exactly what something does. They have to kind of put it forward in an artistic and poetic way. I mean, you read the description on the website and it's like, oh, we're wandering in the hills of something, I don't know, gone off somewhere, but it's awesome. I mean, I love the way they do that, and they're unafraid to be completely impenetrable and mysterious. So what is it? Well, I don't know. I think it's 4 filters in a box. I think it's 4 filters that play with each other in interesting ways, because all their stuff plays with each other in interesting ways. I mean, it's undoubtedly unique and interesting, and I don't know what else to say about it. It's sort of like a filter, isn't it? It's 4 filters going in, 4 resonant things. Signals go in, get messed about, animated or something, come out the other side. I mean, you need to check out some videos about it because I'm completely failing to explain this in any sensible way. But what perhaps is most interesting about it is that it takes something like a filter, which we are so familiar with. We know the sound, we know what it does. In fact, we got to the point we're quite bored of filtering, and they do something fascinating and interesting with it. You know, that's genius. That's the Make Noise genius, I think. Now, Rossum Electro-Music had something called the Trident, which is, of course, a multi-syntronic oscillator ensemble. Essentially, it's 3 oscillators in a box. I wish people got a bit more straightforward with these naming conventions and descriptions. But hey, it all makes it kind of interesting. And what I found particularly interesting about this was that coverage of the Trident sort of emerged about the same time as people were doing coverage of the teenage engineering stuff, which I'll get to later on. And it was just stark contrast. Here was teenage engineering going, we have a thing. I've only just opened the box. Nobody really knows anything about it. Whereas over on the Rossum Electro place where they were doing their demos, which seemed to be in sort of a deep dark basement somewhere, they had oscilloscopes, they had Dave there talking about the whole thing in absolute fine minute detail. Hey, look at this waveform and this waveform going into this. He knew exactly what he was talking about because it's his gear. Whereas unfortunately the teenage engineering guys didn't really have the first idea as to what they were doing. So although Dave and the Trident were extremely nerdy, kind of walked right over the other way, he really did understand his own products, which is a good thing in my book. So what is it? Oh, I don't know. I'm having one of these days. I don't know. Don't know if I know anything this month. Yeah, maybe you're better off just checking out everybody else's videos, and we'll skip this one and come back in April. No, March. Oh God, we've got to do March. I don't know. Where are we? No, we will keep on keeping on. Damn it, I've still got another 30 products to go through. Right, let's go. So the Trident then. Yeah, it's 3 oscillators packed into a thing, and it all cross-modulates. You've got one oscillator going into other oscillators, the other is syncing, and the syncing one going to that one and modulating that one about. And then, so you can do sort of FM into each other and sync into the other one. And that, you got a whole, it's 30 HP, a whole bunch of knobs. It's just an enormous thing. They talk about them being carriers and modulators in a very kind of FM kind of way. And they have this magic in between them all called zing modulation, which apparently is a bit like ring modulation, but with a Z on the front. But what the man says is that the aharmonic sum and difference side tones of ring modulation transform into complex but purely harmonic overtone spectra, which vary dynamically and dramatically with the frequency and wave shape modulations of the modulation oscillators. So you got that, that's a Trident. Yeah, that sounds like fun. Right, just as a change of direction, Steinberg had a new rather lovely looking audio interface called the AXR4. Although it looks also a lot like an RME interface, which was odd, but I guess all these things end up looking a bit like the same. So a whole bunch of inputs, outputs, lovely little screen on the front with all the metering going on. Yeah, nice, sorted. This is a lovely Thunderbolt audio interface, which means it's going to be troublesome for us Windows users because we still can't seem to work out Thunderbolt on Windows. It comes, it goes, it never seems to stay around, you're never quite sure what works with it anyway. But not to worry, it has analog ins and outs, it has ADAT ins and outs, MIDI, and all sorts of other bits and pieces. It has mic preamps built by Rupert Neve, all stuffed in there with all sorts of different sort of colorization settings and interesting things like that. You can chain 3 of them up and you can do extraordinary high fidelity recordings at something like 32-bit and 384 kilohertz. Wow. Native Instruments had a couple of little boxes ready to go for this show. The first one was a mini keyboard called the M32. It's very much like the A series complete control keyboards, which gives you the knobs and a couple of sliders type things and the key, and it all connects up to the control software, which gives you automatic mapping to anything which is NKS compatible. Does any of that make any sense? Well, hopefully it should do, because I've got lots of videos on that kind of thing in the channel that you should go and check out. But essentially it means that with Native Instruments software, you can instantly map the controls on the keyboard to controls in your virtual instruments that you're playing. It's great. It's weeny, it's small, but the keys themselves aren't as small as perhaps most mini keys are. And it could be a really cool, small solution for people who are running about with laptops and stuff. The other thing they did was announce 2 new audio interfaces. Now this, I think, is particularly exciting because the Complete Audio 6, which has been around 10 years, I don't know, a long time, is one of the best audio interfaces that was ever put together because it's a good form factor. It's a nice small thing with a knob on the top, but has a few decent ins and outs and really good drivers. It stood the test of time. It just generally works with everything and it's been really great. And I've been kind of waiting for Native to release something else, something along those lines, something which takes that performance and that quality and pushes it a bit further, makes it either bigger or more interesting or do something else. So what they've done is they've gone the other way. They've gone simple, but in the style of the Complete Audio 6. And it's called the Audio 1 and the Audio 2. I never quite understand the reason why you have something like the Audio 1. It's the same as a Focusrite Solo or other things that only really have one input and output. It's just not a whole lot you can do with that. You're always going to need two microphones, or a microphone and guitar, you know. So the Audio 2 is the one that does that properly. So forget the Audio 1, not interested in that. But the Audio 2 looks like a decent thing. It's only going to be about 100 quid, gives you stereo in and out, 2 mic preamps, that kind of thing, headphones, blah, 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 a nice big knob on the top. Super. Now, Native Instruments have sent me both the mini keyboard and the Audio 2 to check out and do a bit of review on, which is great, except there aren't currently any Windows drivers for them. So when you see these reviews out on YouTube, they're all just Mac users, because with Macs you can just plug things in and they work. But the important thing is how they are going to run on Windows. And until there are drivers and ASIO drivers, we're just not going to know. So any of those videos out there that you see, ignore them. I will be doing the definitive video on them as soon as those drivers become available. Stylophone were there with their Gen R8, and they're still trying to shake the ghost of Rolf Harris, but never mind, we're going to give them the chance with the Gen R8. It's another one of those kind of semi-modular monosynthy typey things. I mean, they did the Stylophone 2 a couple of years ago. It just never really quite worked out exactly what that was, and it was expensive. And you're used to a Stylophone being a mini, you know, cheap 50 quid kind of little synthy thing that you play with. So the Gen R8 is much more in that vibe. I mean, it's bigger, it's chunkier, it's got proper analog electronics in there and sounds pretty meaty. But it also has a touch keyboard on the front, which is vital, I think, if you're Stylophone. And the price of $299 keeps it kind of a bit more under control, I think. It's got dual VCOs, it's got a sub in there, you've got filters of all sorts of different types, it's got 8 waveforms on the LFO, got all the usual sort of shenanigans you'd expect with any kind of monosynth. But it also has a drive knob. It's got a bit of delay built in. It's got a 16-step sequencer and 19 patch points. So it's a much more interesting device and has the potential to do well, I think. Another unexpected synthesizer came from Moog. Wasn't expecting this. This is a hippie kind of dreamboat thing floating out of the cosmos. It's called the Sirin. And for a moment there you thought, wow, this is completely new, funky, groovy. Thank you, Moog, you're awesome. You've given us such a thing. Oh no, it's a Minotaur. Oh right, it's a Minotaur with a new paint job. Oh, all right, well let's have a little look then. Well, what's happened, so it seems, is that Moog really liked the reaction to their grandmother paint job, which I think is excellent. I love the colour and stuff. And they've taken that and they've slapped it on the Minotaur, but that's not everything. They've also gone in and reworked the oscillator, because the Minotaur is a bass synth, plays bass notes, very low notes, whereas the Sirin plays high notes, higher notes. So they've reworked the oscillator to make it work in a different way in a different bunch of registers. So it is actually a different synth to the Minotaur. It's just one of those sort of double take things. You go, wow, wow, it's new, wow, what's this? Oh no, it's the same. No, it's better. Is it the same? I don't know. It's better. Is it good? I don't know. But well, regardless, I thought the video they did for it and the way they've put it across, the marketing, the whole vibe, the 60s, 70s retro vibe, awesome. I love all of that. I'm taken in by that completely every time. And they called it a little analog messenger of joy, and that's exactly what it is. Qubit has some good stuff. In fact, there wasn't as much Eurorack, perhaps, as one would have expected. But Qubit were there. Last year they did a whole rack of good stuff, none of which I've had the chance to play on yet. And this year, they've kind of done the same, which is great, because they do interesting things. But like I say, I've never actually got my hands on any of it yet. I really must do something about that. But anyway, this time around they have something called Prism. Now Prism is a multi-dimensional signal processor. It contains an assortment of DSP effects, and it takes a stereo in, throws a stereo out, and somewhere in between it all gets messed up. It's sort of like a filter. It has things like low pass, high pass, and band pass written all over it. But it also has freeze functions and decimate functions. There's something to do with a prism-shaped audio buffer, and that you're moving your signal in space, and then that changes how it's affected by things. But it sounds like a lot of fun. The other thing I had was called Bloom, which apparently is a fractal sequencer, and it'll generate an infinite number of patterns across 32 steps and 2 channels. You start off by defining your own sequence, and then it takes it and applies randomization to it and other algorithms and starts pulling out variations upon a theme as wild and as crazy or as narrow as you like. Apparently we're not going to see that properly until the end of the year, but that does sound really very interesting. And the final thing they did was they've done an update to their Chord module. Now the original Chord module is great. It's like a polyphonic oscillator. It generates a bunch of tones and you dial in different chords and it plays those chords. You're not playing chords, it generates chords. Does that make sense? But it was a bit big, a bit chunky, so they've cut the size down in half and they've added more functionality. So along with the regular waveforms and regular analog type waveforms, they've now included wavetable waveforms. You can also pull out the 7th tone, that makes sense, and use that kind of as a bit of a melody over the top of the other things droning underneath. And you can actually now address all 4 voices independently and select from a huge library of chords. Qubit somehow managed to make really interesting and quirky digital modules within an analog space. I would just really like to get my hands on some of it. Waldorf had a working and what looked like finished version of the Kyra at the show, which is a good looking synthesizer which came out of the weird looking Valkyrie that we saw at Music Meta last year. The quick recap of the story is that this guy built this synth called the Valkyrie, which had this special, not DSP, but other computerized stuff inside, which was generating hundreds of oscillators, hundreds of sounds and everything all put together. And the guy from Waldorf saw it and thought, wow, this is really great, mate. Why don't I make it for you? Because obviously this is looking a bit ropey. And so they did. They got together and Waldorf have taken it on, and it's now called the Kyra, and it looks beautiful now in its newly designed Waldorf style case, and it's still absolutely capable of producing these hundreds of thousands of oscillators and a massive sort of sounds. But the best thing is that at NAMM they actually had a guy who knew how to demo it, because last year at Music Messer, listening to the guy talking about it and some of the sound demos, it's just like, what is this thing? It seems, could be, don't know. Whereas this time around, they had a guy talking about it and he knew exactly what it was talking about and was able to back that up with the sounds and stuff that came out of it. So Kyra has 128 voices. It has 10 oscillators per voice of virtual analog synthesis. And it's 8-part multi-timbral, which gives you a total of 1,280 oscillators. You can select from over 3,000 wavetables. I mean, you're going to... Which oscillator? So, okay, oscillator number 1, I'm going to have wavetable 2,953. Okay, oscillator number 2, wavetable. You can see how that could get a little bit laborious. But I'm sure there are going to be some fantastically crafted presets in there by that usual team of sound designers and industry professionals. So essentially the Kyra is this guaranteed polyphony, computerized, digital, massive swarm of oscillators and filters and modulation, all sorts of stuff going on, capable of producing immense sounds. And we're really looking forward to actually seeing that in person. I mean, Waldorf are going to be at the Thomann thing, so maybe there'll be an opportunity there to have a play on it, because that'll be interesting, just to see the enormity of the sound, what that's like, what the workflow is like. Can you actually navigate it? And is it all about assigning 1 of 1,000 oscillators to 1 of 3,000 wavetables? Don't know, we shall see. This is an interesting box from a company called Flame, and it's called the Maander. It might not be, I mean, it's got 2 A's in it next to each other, one of them's got those dots at the top, so it could be pronounced in any way that I have no idea about. Doesn't matter. What it is a 4-voice synthesizer with inbuilt filter bank and kind of live performance sequencer. It looks interesting because it's got this like graphic EQ styly thing at the bottom, which of course is your filter bank. But what we know so far is that it's a wavetable engine, 4 voices, all the usual envelopes and LFOs and stuff, but then it has this 12-band analog filter bank. What does that all mean? I don't really know. I haven't had the time really to look into it any deeper than that, but it looks cool. 4 voices, sequencer, filter bank thingy going on, lots of sliders to move around the place, and was just kind of very different from other things that we're seeing at the moment. And it's really nice to see something a little bit different. So go and check that out, because I haven't had the chance to yet. Now this is quite interesting from Buchla. They seem to be trying to get back in on a bit more of the mainstream action. So this year at NAMM they were showing something that they are calling the Red Panel range. Now a Red Panel, apparently, so the story goes, on the old Buchla modular things there was a blank panel that was red, and allegedly it was all covered in LSD. So the plan was you're patching and you would run your finger down the red panel and go and then do more patching, and you go, oh look, there's, oh, and wow. I don't know what happens when you take LSD particularly, but there you go. You know, trippy 60s 70s stuff, man. That's what all those Californian dudes are all about, and that was part of the Buchla thing. And they're trying to bring this drug culture into Eurorack. Don't know that we need it, thank you. Or maybe we do, I don't know, but it's a reference to that. I don't know why, who knows? The panels aren't even red, man. I don't know that I really get what they're trying to do. Doesn't matter. But what they have is that they've magically pulled a whole bunch of Eurorack modules out of their arse. No, that's not actually what happened. What they've done is that they've taken Catalyst Audio's awesome Buchla Eurorack modules and kind of made them their own. So Catalyst Audio have been doing this for a couple of years, been building Buchla type modules into Eurorack form. And now Buchla has gone, oh, all right, that's really interesting, let's have that. And so hopefully they're giving them some money or something and help them finish it, and they're now marketing these as their own. However, they do stress that these are not proper Buchla modules. These are sort of lower quality Eurorack ones. It's not the real thing. It's something like the real thing that we are happy to endorse, as long as you understand that you want proper music easel stuff if you want proper Buchla, the big stuff. Not this. But for the rest of us, it means we get a chance to use that kind of Buchla sound, whatever that may mean to you, and those different sorts of modules within our Eurorack, which is very, very interesting. Now, I don't know a whole lot about Buchla, to be fair, but what I do know is that it just brings in a different vibe, a different flavour it's less about filters, because you get stuck into this subtractive way of working. You've got oscillator, filter, envelope, that kind of thing. Whereas Buchla tends to work differently. It works more of an additive thing, adding harmonics and tones to things. And that's inevitably going to bring a different way of working and a different sound out of your rig. And of course, the great thing about Eurorack is that when compared to proper sized Buchla, it's something in the region of affordable. I mean, the modules start at about $150 for probably an input-output thing, up to more like $400 for something which actually does something. But in Eurorack terms, yeah, that's all fine. That's what we would call affordable. So it's very interesting. They are creamy coloured, whitey, blacky coloured, not really red panelled at all. So we're all immediately confused by all of that, and then have to talk about these drug stories, which I guess is interesting of itself. But it's, you know, pretty awesome that Buchla are getting involved in Eurorack. That's a really great thing. Right, let's talk about a couple of DAW updates. The first one is Tracktion have released Waveform 10. Now, I've got a lot of time for Tracktion. I did a big review of their version 7, which is now probably a couple of years ago, I imagine. But it's got a new lease of life, because that's now the free version that they let people have for free. And so my video review of that has suddenly gone ba-doing, as everyone's going, oh, look, it's free. And look, here's a review of it. And it actually sounds pretty good, which it is. But now they've moved on to Waveform 8, Waveform 9, and now Waveform 10. And every time they release a new version, I say, right, I'm going to do a review. And I just can't get around to it. Because reviewing a DAW is quite a major undertaking. It takes a lot of focus and thought to work your way through things and to try to find what's interesting in order to bring out, in order to demonstrate it. Yeah, interesting. Because of just purely the nature of the videos that I do, I'm not happy to sit there for 5 minutes and just talk about it like I am now. If I'm going to do a review, I'm going to do a flipping hour or two. So yeah, hopefully I will get around to reviewing Waveform 10 properly, because it's worthwhile, because Tracktion Waveform 10 is an interesting place. It's a different place. I mean, okay, you've got the same thing. You record stuff in it from left to right. You've got MIDI, you've got audio, you've got effects. It now has a mixer inside, which is great. But Tracktion has a lot of creativity built in the way that it uses modulation, the way that it chains things together. You can create enormous synthesizer patches using all sorts of different plugins and wiring them together in their own plugin environment. You can create the exact signal chain that you want from where your audio starts, where your effects are, where the mixing is, where the panning is, all those sorts of things. It's very, very open and allows you to get stuck into parameters that you can't in many other DAWs. I mean, it has a bin of LFOs that you drag in. I want to stick an LFO on something. Just do it, drag it in, and it's done. I don't know any other DAW that lets you do that. And it has a lot of interesting creative stuff based on the individual clips in the timeline. So you open up a clip of MIDI and you've got all sorts of processes you can apply directly to that. It becomes a little working environment all by itself. It's very, very interesting. And so I'm keen to find out exactly what's new in version 10 and what that's all about, and whether it's time for everybody else to start taking it as seriously as they should. The other company to release a major DAW update was MOTU. Mark of the Unicorn have released Digital Performer 10. Now, Digital Performer was originally a Apple Mac piece of software, but a couple of versions ago it made it onto Windows for the first time, which I think is quite exciting. I'm not that familiar with Digital Performer myself, simply because it's never been on Windows until recently, but I understand that it's something quite cool, quite slimmed down, very Logic-like is the impression that I get. However, with version 10, they've done something completely sort of weird and crazy. They've adopted an Ableton Live clip launching system. Or at least it's a bit like Ableton Live. It looks very much like Ableton Live, but for one thing, which is that as you launch clips, they drop down. It's like you've got this pool at the bottom, this queuing system at the bottom. So you've got all your clips laid out like you would in Ableton or Bitwig or something like that. And then you trigger the loop, and the loop drops down into the queue at the bottom. And that's really interesting. Makes you think, wow, why has no one ever thought of that before? So it makes it much less linear, I suppose, in that you're not running a scene, or you can trigger a whole scene, so a whole scene drops down, but you kind of stack up loops and then tell the system when to move on to the next one. It's just a different take on doing something which we're all very used to at the moment, but it just seems to be doing it differently. And that always, makes me go, ooh, that's interesting, because I never thought of doing it like that before. And here come MOTU with putting this engine within their normal, very kind of boring, straightforward door, and have done something innovative and interesting. Yeah, good job. I've no idea what the whole thing does, and I've never had a go, but it's worth looking at and checking out, I think, because there could be something fascinating in there. Now, something that we saw a glimpse of before the show, and we're still not really any the wiser, but that is Waverazor being run in a Eurorack module. Now, Waverazor is this very cool, very angry software synthesizer. It's fabulously in blue and red, looks very Tron-like, it's all glowy and liney and vector graphics and stuff. Sounds phenomenal. You can really get your fingers in there, particularly on a touch interface, and mess stuff about. It's a very enjoyable synthesizer. I like it a lot. It's probably one of my favorites, I think. And it just pops off the screen. It's just a very exciting place to play. Well, they've taken that, or at least the oscillator from that, and they've stuffed it into a 1010 Music Eurorack module. You know, the ones that they have got their Bitbox, Synthbox, DSP-based Eurorack modules in. It's kind of, they've got this standard Eurorack module with a screen and the knobs and the patch points, and they can run their own stuff within it. And now they've ported across the Waverazor into that environment, and it looks awesome. I mean, it has such a great interface anyway that it's always going to look good whatever you put it in. Whatever screen it's running on, it's going to look fabulous. But this, as far as I can work out, is the oscillator section from Waverazor in there, bunch of patch points, run it through a Eurorack, flipping phenomenal. I mean, that's awesome, that is. I mean, you can get that sound, that angriness, that rawness, I mean, obviously digital stuff, I suspect, running through your rack. Could be a whole load of fun, and also throws up the potential of running other things within this environment. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, once you start building digital modules which are essentially running a piece of software, then it can run whatever it likes, can't it? You just have to code it to make that work. Interesting. Which brings us on to the next thing I wanted to talk about. And that's the Mind Music Labs ELK. Now, we've seen this for a few years now, and it's never quite seemed to manage to actually make it into anything. Now, this is ELK. This is a music operating system. The idea is that you run this operating system on little bits of hardware, things like Arduinos or Raspberry Pis or some other kind of processor, some microcomputer. You run this operating system, and then on that you can run all sorts of plugins and instruments and whatever you want. And that sounds pretty exciting. The problem is that nothing ever seems to come of that. The hardware itself doesn't ever seem to materialize, and yet the idea seems immense. So what you're saying is, I could run any VST plugin, for instance, on a piece of hardware. So is this like those old receptor style VST hosts where you can run VST plugins on a piece of hardware? I suppose it is. I suppose it is like that. But I think the idea, what Mind Music Labs are trying to get someone to do, is to build a range of hardware that you can stuff these plugins in and then use them like a piece of hardware on your desktop. And that has a lot of potential. It's just that it hasn't actually happened, and that's become a point of frustration, particularly for me, because I like this sort of stuff. I like the idea of it. It's just the reality of it, the projection into our dimension has not really been there. And so just before NAMM, they announced that they've now partnered up with Propellerhead to produce rack extensions. All of the rack extensions are now compatible with this ELK Music OS. But how do you actually get to access that? That's the problem. I mean, at the show, they had this quite big Eurorack module in which apparently you could run rack extensions. But there was no real demonstration of that, no real showing how that actually really worked, because the nitty-gritty, I think, is what's important. I want to know exactly how you put a plug-in into this piece of hardware, then how you map it to the controls, because that is interesting. Because there's a whole range of stuff in rack extensions that could be useful within any kind of Eurorack. The other thing I wasn't sure about was the large nature of the module that they had there. It's kind of a bit generic. I mean, before the show, there was this render knocking around of, you know, a rack extension in hardware, like they've realized all the knobs and controls from some rack extension synth, and made it into hardware. I don't think that's the point, because it needs to be a little bit more versatile than that. You're not going to produce a single piece of hardware for every single plugin, because that would be nuts. So it's not going to be like that. They need to think slightly differently, I think. And what needs to happen is that they need to release this a bit more into the wild, so that URAC manufacturers or interested parties can start producing interesting little modules with a few controls on that can best be mapped to some form of plugin. And then you need to have the ability to load those different plugins into it and use it. Does that make sense? I don't know. I mean, I've sort of spoken to them a bit about it. I've tried to have conversations that's not really quite panned out. But my understanding is that they are thinking this at very much of a high level. They are looking for developers to come in, a big manufacturer, and do something awesome with it. And I find that slightly annoying. I'd like them to release it a bit more in some kind of open source way, but obviously, you know, we have to pay for the license or whatever, that's fine. But let the community get stuck in, because there's a whole community of Arduino and Raspberry Pi people out there who could write stuff for it, stick the OS on, and get that working so that we can all enjoy it. And I've got plenty of ideas myself for doing little controller front panels for these things to get that to work in URAC. I think that would be brilliant. So I think it's one of those things which has this enormous amount of potential. It's just that we can't seem to bring it into reality. And that's a shame. But maybe they'll get there. Maybe they'll partner up with the right person and it will start to happen. I just don't know. Dreadbox had a couple of really quite weird things at NAMM. I mean, I sometimes forget that Dreadbox are actually a stomp box manufacturer before they were a URAC manufacturer. So they're very much at home in the world of effects and stomp boxes and guitars and things like that. However, what they'd brought along was this fabulous looking 80s box of effects. It's called the Hypnosis, and it's fantastic in kind of pink and teal. It looks amazing and has time-based effects, delays, chorus, reverb, that kind of thing. Yeah, in fact, the reverb is in this window, this strange shaped, like we like to do in the 80s, a strange window, and it glows kind of pink when you run stuff through it. Otherwise, it's chorus flanger, it's delay, and you just dial it in on the front using knobs. It's just brilliant. Run some signal in, run some signal out, affect it on your desktop with some crazy stuff and glowing lights and neon and stuff going on. Brilliant, love it. It looks like a load of fun. It would look great on anybody's desktop. It would clash with your shell suit, and is just the sort of thing I like to see these days. The other thing they did, and I think this is completely genius, and I think we might see a lot more of stuff like this, and that's the Komorebi. Komorebi, I think, could possibly be called. Something to do with a magic cat. Anyway, and this is also pink and green and weird and fabulous and 80s looking. But what am I talking about? Well, this is a stomp box. It's essentially a chorus flanger pedal. Nothing particularly interesting about that. And it's a stomp box with a button on it. But what is interesting about it is that it has URAC patch sockets, so that you can patch a URAC directly into it. And this just blows the lid off this whole idea that URAC and synthesizer people like to use stomp box effects. Because we do. Look, I got one here. Stomp box effects. It's a fantastic thing because they tend to be cheap or cheaper and give you access to sounds and stuff that you can use outside the sometimes fiddly constraints of URAC, and you can use them in all sorts of other bits and pieces. They're just very cool. And so what's remarkable is that Dreadbox have gone, right, so synth people, URAC people, like using stomp box effects, well, let's put in a couple of patch points for them so they can modulate it. Oh, yeah, I can modulate the stomp box from my URAC, and I can go in at the right sort of levels. I'm not having to fuss around at trying to get the levels matched, because there's a little bit of, you know, high level from URAC and low level from guitars, and trying to get all that sorted out to get a decent sound. And so this sort of stuff built into a stomp box is completely genius. But I'm loving the look, I'm loving the whole sort of Japanese aesthetic, and the fact that apparently this is all about light streaming through a summer's field of days or something. It's a chorus effect, right? And it's very beautiful, and I think that's a good thing. And I hope we'll see more and more of this kind of thing. So my last thing from NAMM, before we move on to other non-NAMM things, is from Gamechanger Audio. Now, Gamechanger Audio are famous probably mostly for their plasma distortion. Plasma distortion, which started off in the stomp pedal. It's a little thing with a tube of plasma going stuff, distortion, nice. So they released that, and then they did something with Erica Synths, and Erica Synths have released a Eurorack module that's got the same tube in there full of sparks that go psh, psh. And then they've released a rack mount version with a really big tube in it, which is still making this awesome kind of distortion sound. You know, if you like that sort of thing. So it was a little unexpected to see that they'd brought along a prototype synthesizer. But this was unlike any synthesizer you have ever seen. In fact, it's less like a synthesizer and more like some kind of enormous mechanical object. They're calling it the MOTU piano. And the way that it works is that it uses a little electric motors as oscillators. You know, little electric motors, like what you have in your Lego Technic set. There's a little motor that spins around, because that's oscillating, obviously it's spinning something around. And so they thought, oh no, why don't we use a bunch of motors that are spinning and use those as oscillators? Because they are oscillators, aren't they? And they're right. And so they have. It's kind of like some mad work of genius. So inside this thing, you've got a whole bunch of these little motors. They're all spinning these optical discs, and that's creating the waveform. So they're spinning things, creating the waveform, and then you somehow use some kind of pickup to take the sound off that. Fascinating. You get 3 motors per voice. 3 motors per voice. So it can be polyphonic. It's got all these motors stuffed inside it. They didn't really have it working completely well, but they did have one little sort of stuck into a stomp box size 3 of these motors together that they could produce sounds on. And that was very interesting. So the whole thing would have 36 motors inside, giving you a full sort of octave of 12-note polyphony, I suppose. And what's interesting about it is its physicality, because as you play up and down the keyboard, the motors themselves have to spin up in order to achieve the different pitches. But because these are mechanical, it takes a certain amount of time for them to do that. So there's all this glide happening, this portamento between hitting a chord down here and hitting something up here, as the motors had to take a finite amount of time to spin up to get to that point. Now they were talking about how they were going to minimize that, but I actually thought that was a bit of a feature that really gives you a sense of the reality of the machine. There are all sorts of controls over the front about acceleration and glide, as well as filters and envelopes and all the usual sort of synthy stuff. But it's just a fascinating idea that the sound is being created by these spinning motors. And that kind of puts it into the realms of a Wurlitzer or some other kind of piano which is actually using physical means to create its electronic sound. They hope to get it to Kickstarter by the end of the year, but it's probably, I think, the most fascinating thing at NAMM this year was this audio motor piano. Weird, wonderful, and from people who are making guitar pedals. So that doesn't make any sense either. But flip, let's go with it. So just to finish off with a couple of other things that have happened since NAMM, as I say, it's a little bit of a quiet time, but there has just been 1 or 2 things worth mentioning. First of all, DivKid has released his first module. It's called Mutes, and it's a 4-channel sort of performance muter. Stick 4 channels of stuff in it, and you've got switches to mute it out, or turn it on, of course, which is the other way you can use it. You don't have to mute stuff, you can turn stuff on, unmute stuff. It also has momentary switches as well, so not only do you turn it on or turn it off, you can pull it on for a bit and then release it. Pull it on for a bit and then release it. And it turns off again. It's brilliantly simple, it's quite a nice looking module, and it works with both audio signals and CV signals. Has a little bit of internal normalization, so you can put one thing in and send it to different destinations and mute things out, so you can send one thing through a filter, one thing through an effect, and then blend those in and out at the other end. It's great. I got one. I got the kit version, and I've done a full video on how you build the kit, which was quite good fun, and then a bit of a demo on it, and that's all in the YouTube channel. And it's immediately useful. In any kind of live performance situation, in any kind of anything performance situation, you want to be able to turn stuff on and off easily and quickly. It's exactly the same reason why I got the Muton, which I have in my case also. And the Muton works in a very similar way. It's got soft mute buttons that don't click as you turn them off. But in the Mutes, what I really like is the momentary thing and the fact that it's all run by Vactrals. Vactrals are these optical visual light-based resistors, so that when the light goes on, it opens up the door, the light goes off, it closes the door on the thing, which gives it this certain amount of attack and decay when you're muting things. And that's really nice. It has a very organic and natural feel to it. So that's very cool indeed. The kit is only about 70 quid. Go in and build yourself one because it's a nice little module. The other really cool thing I saw is called ALK2 from zenaudio.io. Is it called ALK2? I don't know. Anyway, it's a looping DAW, and it's come to Windows for the very first time. Now, this is one of those pieces of software which is designed to make live looping performances work a bit more seamlessly. I mean, there's some fantastic stuff out there that people often do in Ableton Live. You set up an Ableton Live arrangement and you start recording stuff into it, and then that loops, and you then go onto another track and record something else and that loops, and you build up this performance in real time, in one shot, in one take, and it's fantastic. But what ALK2 does is specialize in providing a pre-arranged loopable performancing environment. I'm not explaining this very well. So if you're going to do a looped performance, you are going to know what you're doing. This isn't about improvisation. This is about performing multiple instruments, multiple things in front of an audience and having it make some kind of sense. If you're using a looping pedal, which is what a lot of people do this with, you can get away with stuff. You layer stuff up and then you can cut a few things out or undo a few things and layer them up again. But the structure of the song has to be quite basic, has to be quite repetitive, and also restrictive within the length of that loop. You can do some phenomenal stuff, but it has its limitations. Within this piece of software, you arrange, like in a DAW, like in a clip view, you arrange on a timeline where you want all your different parts of the song to be. And when you start off, they're all empty. And then as you hit go, you start to play your bits, and that gets recorded where you want it to be recorded, but then it gets inserted in all those other places where you've already pre-inserted it. So you might play a little guitar lick, and then you might start singing, and your guitar lick will come back in later on when you want it to. So it provides a much more sort of thought-based, more complex and interesting way to produce a live performance with electronic instruments all by yourself on your Todd, with it all coming back in and out when you want it to do. So you can create much more complex arrangements and more interesting songs. The downside for me personally is that you really do have to know how your song's going to go before you do this. You can't just wing it like you can with a loop pedal. You have to kind of plan it all out beforehand. But that's ultimately where its strength lies, and that's actually what you should be doing if you're doing a live performance. You should know what you're doing. You shouldn't just be making it up on the spot every time. Or maybe you should, I don't know. But it's come to Windows for the first time. That's completely awesome, and I think I might go and check that out. And finally, a little bit of teenage engineering, because they've had a bit of a right royal time of it lately. First of all, they had their NAMM debacle, where they had their wonderful 400 modular thing, fabulously yellow and designed modular synthesizer that no one knew how to use, let alone demo. But by the end of NAMM, Basek, thankfully, and Cuckoo had got in there and actually got it to work properly, because it was just sounding pretty crap for most of the show. And you got like people like Future Music going in there and making a video on it and sticking that video on YouTube, and you're watching it going, this is rubbish. This is really not good. What on earth were they thinking? But finally, somebody got some decent sound out of it. But anyway, so after that, I imagine they went back to Teenage Engineering Land and thought, cool, wow, that was harder than we thought. You can't just bring out a product and not know how to work it and expect everyone to go amazing over it. However, everybody did, of course, and they already sold out of that, and they've sold out of the other ones. They didn't even have the other ones to show. They just had the bits of metal for the 170 and the 16 little keyboard sequencer. And it's all great, it's all groovy, it all looks fantastic. Now, unfortunately, they suddenly announced that they are going to refund everyone who placed an order on the 170 and the little 16 because they just can't get them made. There's some kind of problem. And rather than sort of hang on to the money and put people off and say, oh, it's going to take a little bit longer, it's going to take a little bit longer, and annoying the heck out of people, they're just cancelling it, giving you your money back and saying, no, we just ain't going to do that just at the minute. Which is either really very nice of them or nuts. I'm not entirely sure which one, because I think most people who wanted to buy one would be happy to wait longer. But whatever they're deciding to do, they've decided that it's just best to give people their money back and give them the opportunity to perhaps upgrade to the 400 or buy something else or whatever. So a little bit unsure what's going on there. Now, at the same time, after a long time of not being available, the OP1, their original little groove box sequencer synthesizer little thing, suddenly came back, but with a 50% price hike, which was weird because we'd had all these conversations earlier because there was this rumor that the OP1 was dead and they're not going to make any more. And so instantly second-hand prices just went through the roof. People were asking for thousands of pounds for, you know, a second-hand OP1. I mean, stupid money. And people were paying it on eBay. And at that point, Teenage Engineering actually sort of stepped in and said, no, we haven't discontinued the OP1. We're just trying to work out the manufacturing because it's had to change a little bit because I think the screen's no longer available. So they've had to change a thought on it, you know, do a little bit of work, and it'll be back soon. And so we went, oh, all right then. And then it comes back and it's suddenly $500 more expensive. Oh, that's weird. Now, Teenage Engineering made a bit of an announcement to say that, oh, well, it's because of the retooling. We had to do a bit of recoding, we had to source some new bits, and there's prices and currency fluctuations, blah, 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 blah. And I think almost everybody has gone, what? That doesn't really make sense. Really? What? But anyway, there we go. I don't quite know what to make of all that. It seems strange. It's coming at the same time. I mean, Teenage Engineering, we have to understand, are a tiny, weeny little company. It's just a bunch of people trying to make cool stuff. And they do make cool stuff. But it's not easy being a tiny company making cool stuff when they sell shed loads and shed loads of pocket operators. They probably don't even have the time to keep producing those, while at the same time trying to develop something else. I mean, they had all sorts of trouble with the OPZ. It's taken an age to get that to market, and they finally have now. At the same time, the OP1 then going out of stock, and they're not able to make it because things are disappearing. And then they've got this whole modular thing going on that they released probably a couple of months too early because no one really knew what they were doing, and it wasn't available. And then, of course, that's the manufacturing of that has all gone down the pan. So you've got to wonder what the heck is going on over at Teenage Engineering HQ. And I hope they're all right and holding on to themselves through this kind of rocky patch. But undoubtedly, the 400, the yellow modular thing, was very exciting and everyone loved the whole idea of it. They just have to somehow deliver it and pull it off. It's a shame about the 170. I guess it will be coming back at some point when they've worked out how to manufacture the thing. But it's all just a little bit weird. It doesn't give you a great deal of confidence in giving Teenage Engineering a lot of your money just at the minute. But hopefully we will see that start to pan out, and maybe by Super Booth we'll have a better idea of what the heck's going on. So I think that's it. I think that's enough. I think I've been talking long enough. It's been a long old session, this one, and I still don't really know what the heck I'm doing. But here we are, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to listen to my ponderings. Now, this Sunday evening, I will be doing my live stream, as I like to do after I've done a Molten Monthly, where you can all come together and we can chat about stuff. We can talk about the Thomann thing, what the heck that's all about. We can talk about these products that I've mentioned, or anything else that you like. And failing all of that, I'll make a bit of music. I am planning to make a video on using guitar pedals of Eurorack, so maybe I can do a bit of that on Sunday night. That might be fun. Or, if you like, I can entertain you with sounds of the 60s, can't I? Or something. Whatever. I don't know. Who knows, but be there. It will be 8 o'clock GMT, I think. 8 o'clock sounds about right. Let's do that Sunday night. And if that changes, just hang out around and I'll be sending out information about when we're going to start. But this Sunday, let's do that. It'll be March, I think. March the 3rd. Yes, there we go. Sunday night, March the 3rd, 8 o'clock. Let's do that. In the meantime, just, you know, subscribe, comment, tell me lots of things that you like to talk about. I'm quite happy to answer questions and bits and pieces about all sorts of gear. Coming up, I've got Eurorack and guitar effects. I've got some DIY projects coming up. I want to build a case into that case thing that I've got. I've got a lot of surface stuff coming up, performance testing. Oh, lots and lots of videos to come. And don't forget, if you want to get in on the action and support me with a bit of cash, then do head over to patreon.com. Otherwise, just hang out, man. Be groovy. And in the meantime, go make some tunes.